I can't sit down. It hurts, were the first words Valentina spoke that morning. Her backpack still slung over her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the classroom floor. Daniel, the teacher, stopped what he was doing. The 6-year-old girl stood motionless in front of her chair while the other children unpacked their things, laughed, and settled into their seats. She remained standing, pale, frightened. Daniel approached and crouched to her level. She bit her lip and shook her head slowly. Down here, it hurts a lot, she whispered, not meeting his eyes. Daniel frowned. Did you fall? Did you get hurt at home? Valentina didn't answer. She clasped her small hands tightly, as if afraid to say anything. Can you tell me, my dear, no one's going to be mad at you? She hesitated, her voice trembling when she spoke. When I said, it hurts, that was all, and then silence. That phrase, her posture, stirred something in his gut, something beyond physical pain. Come, let's sit for a bit over there in the corner of the room, he said gently, guiding her toward a secluded table where she could have a moment of calm. But she stopped. Can I stay standing, please? She asked softly, her eyes brimming with tears. Daniel nodded, and in that moment, something inside him broke. He stepped out of the classroom discreetly, pulled out his phone in the hallway, and dialed police. This is San Benito Elementary School. My name's Daniel Martinez. I'm a teacher. I have a 6-year-old student who says it hurts too. Sit. I can't be sure what happened, but something's wrong. Please come as soon as possible. He hung up, hands trembling, took a deep breath, and returned to the classroom. Keeping his face calm, he crouched by her side against the wall and smiled tenderly. Everything's okay. Yes, I'm here with you. Valentina said nothing, just rested her little head on his arm and closed her eyes for a moment. In that silence was a scream, and Daniel knew this wasn't normal. The patrol arrived just after 8:30. 2 officers, a man and a woman, stepped out calmly. No sirens, no rush. Everything seemed routine, adjusting her blouse quickly, as if the linen uniform and neat bun could hide her discomfort. Good morning. Officers, I'm Carmen Avila, school principal. The teacher's waiting for you, but if I may, I think this was a bit overblown. The male officer nodded and kept walking, but the female officer gave a quick, attentive glance, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the classroom door where Daniel had left. Valentina. As soon as the officers entered, he spoke plainly. She wouldn't sit, said it hurt, and the way she said it, her body, it's not normal. Something's wrong, the principal interjected. Daniel, please, she's a child. It could be anything, a fall, a minor bruise. It didn't warrant calling the police like it's a crime. Silence followed. The officers asked to speak with the girl. Valentina was called to the coordination room. She walked in slowly, her gaze frightened, as if each step were dangerous. The female officer crouched in front of her. Hi, princess. How are you? We're just here to talk a little. Okay. The girl nodded but didn't open her mouth. Not a single sound. The officer tried again. We heard you felt pain when you sat down, then at the door, and then she whispered, it's gone now. It hit Daniel like a blow. She's scared, he said, but no one responded after a few minutes. The officers left the room. No visible marks. No prior reports. The girl wouldn't talk. Unfortunately, we can't do anything for now, the male officer explained, but she's scared. Daniel insisted. The female officer, more sensitive, approached him quietly. Evidence. If clear signs appear or there's another incident, call again. We're on alert. I'll file a report, she said sincerely. But for Daniel, it was too little, far too little. The patrol left. The girl returned to the classroom, and the school carried on as if nothing had happened. Carmen approached Daniel later while he graded assignments. You need to be more careful. Daniel, these things affect the school, cause unnecessary alarm. The principal didn't respond, just stepped back and left the room. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He relived Valentina's look 1,000 times. The way she clutched her blouse, the fear in her voice, no blood, no screams, no certainties. But there was something inside him, an unease that wouldn't fade, screaming what no one else wanted to see. And for the first time, he understood that sometimes silence hurts too, what was happening. Even if he had to do it alone, the next morning, Daniel arrived at school early, passed the principal's office without glancing at Carmen, and went straight to the classroom. He opened the windows, arranged the desks, and took a deep breath. The sleepless night still lingered in his body, but something inside him stayed alert. As the students began to arrive, Daniel greeted them with his usual smile. Valentina came in last, eyes. Down, heading straight to her spot. She didn't sit, just stood, like the day before, and murmured, "Can I do the drawing standing up?" Daniel nodded gently. "Of course. Do it however you want." The day's activity was open-ended, paper and crayons on the table. The theme, draw a place you know well. The kids got excited. Grandparent houses, dogs, parks. Valentina, though, drew in silence, her face serious, her strokes firm. When she finished, she left the paper face down and crossed her arms. Daniel went desk to desk, praising the drawings, smiling sincerely until he reached Valentina's. He turned the paper over carefully and felt a chill. It was a chair in the center of the page. Around it, red splotches scattered like drops, drawn with a trembling hand. The childlike drawing didn't hide its dark meaning. Daniel stood there for a few seconds, paper in hand, then knelt beside the girl. "This is your drawing, right?" She nodded slightly. "Want to tell me what this is?" Valentina bit her lower lip, didn't answer. "It's okay. You don't have to talk now." For the first time, she looked him in the eyes. "I like how you talk to me," she said softly. Daniel smiled, his eyes welled with tears. "And I like how you draw." He folded the paper carefully, and as soon as class ended, he went straight to the school psychologist's office. Letitia, he showed her the drawing without a word. She studied it with expert eyes, then looked at Daniel. "It's symbolic, but it's serious, very serious." "No. One's listening to her. I'm trying," he said, his voice catching. Letitia took a deep breath. "We have to act. I'll file a report and request an official evaluation. But you need to keep building her trust. She's starting to open up to you. That might be the only chance we have." Daniel nodded. He returned to the classroom and handed Valentina a blank sheet with a sentence written in the corner. "If you want to tell me something, you can draw it." Valentina took the paper carefully, and for the first time, she smiled. A small, shy smile, but one that said so much. She was starting to trust. It was Friday. The week ended with low clouds and a heavy sky. Valentina spent the day quieter than usual, but stayed close to Daniel, shifting uncomfortably, as if the chair had invisible thorns. The teacher watched everything closely at dismissal, while organizing materials. Daniel noticed something different outside. A man leaning against the school gate, tall, broad-shouldered, arms crossed, face stern. His gaze wasn't that of someone waiting for a child with affection. It was one of imposing authority. He heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. "Valentina, your guardian's here," the monitor announced. The girl froze. The faint smile she tried to form over the past days vanished instantly. She walked to the door without looking at anyone. Daniel followed discreetly. The man waited impatiently. No uniform, no backpack. He wore a wrinkled shirt and paint-stained jeans. "Hurry up, kid," he said, not hiding his irritation. Valentina lowered her head, didn't offer her hand, just turned and started walking. The girl followed. That's when Daniel approached. "Are you Valentina's father?" The man stopped, turned slowly, and answered with disdain, "Stepfather." "And who are you?" "Daniel Martinez. I'm her teacher." Rogelio raised an eyebrow. Daniel held his stance firm. "I just want to make sure she's okay. She's been showing some discomfort lately. Said it hurts to sit, for example." Rogelio gave a dry, humorless smile. "Kids make up a lot of things. You should be teaching reading, not poking around where you're not wanted." Daniel felt his blood boil, but took a deep breath. "I'm just doing my job." The stepfather stared at him for a couple more seconds, then turned without a word, yanking Valentina by the arm. She walked in silence, as if she'd forgotten how to speak. Daniel stood there, watching them disappear through the gate. By the end of the afternoon, he couldn't take it. He pulled the emergency contact number from the school file and called. Rebecca, the mother, answered. "This is Daniel, Valentina's teacher from San Benito School. How is everything?" A brief silence followed. "Yes, everything's fine. Did something happen?" "I wanted to talk about Valentina. She's shown signs of pain and discomfort. And, well, today I noticed she got very tense when she saw her stepfather." Rebecca sighed nervously. "Look, teacher, Valentina's very sensitive. Little things scare her. But everything's under control." "Yes." Daniel pressed, his voice calm. "I understand. I just want to help." More silence. "I appreciate it. But there's nothing to worry about. She just needs to adjust. It's a new school, a different environment, that's all." The call ended shortly after. Daniel set the phone down on the table, his chest tight. The feeling was clear. She knew, and for some reason, she wouldn't or couldn't tell the truth. Saturday dawned gray. Daniel spent the morning glancing at the clock, restless, a decision forming in the back of his mind. He finally took a deep breath, grabbed a clipboard with some school papers, and left. He wore a simple shirt, trying to look like just another teacher making a routine visit. But he knew he was searching for something the school preferred to ignore with the address. In hand, he arrived at a narrow street of modest houses. He found the number. A makeshift curtain covered the window. The place smelled of neglect. Daniel clapped twice. A thin boy appeared at the door, about 10 years old, messy hair, wearing an oversized t-shirt high. Daniel said, smiling kindly, "Are you Valentina's brother?" The boy nodded. "Yeah, I'm Hugo, but she's not here. She went with Rogelio to the market," though he already knew the answer. "Yes." The boy replied without enthusiasm. "What's your name?" "Hugo. Nice to meet you." "Hugo, I'm Daniel, Valentina's teacher. I wanted to talk to your mom. Is she around?" "She's asleep," the boy said, glancing inside. Daniel looked too. The living room was dark despite it being nearly 11 in the morning. A broken couch, a pile of dirty dishes in the corner, a stained floor, no toys, no books, nothing hinting at childhood. "Do you still go to school, Hugo?" Daniel asked. The boy shrugged. "I used to, but not anymore. Now I have to watch things here." Daniel took a deep breath and crouched to his level. "Can I ask you something, Hugo?" The boy nodded, a bit wary. "When Valentina gets sad or cries, what happens?" Hugo looked away, silent, then, almost in a whisper, "He doesn't like it when she cries." Daniel swallowed hard. "Who doesn't? Rogelio?" Hugo said softly, "And what does he do when she cries?" The boy hesitated again, then said it like it was normal. "He grabs the belt. Sometimes he yells, sometimes he hits her, but he says it so she learns." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain his anger. "Hugo, have you told anyone about this?" The boy shook his head. "No. Mom would leave for good, and we'd be alone." Daniel fell silent. That phrase stung. If we tell, Mom would leave for good. He stood slowly, pulled a school flyer from his pocket, and wrote his name on it with a pen. "If you ever want to talk or something happens, call me." "Okay, I'm here to help." Hugo took the paper and nodded faintly. Daniel thanked him and walked away. The weight in his chest was no longer just suspicion. Now it had a name, a face, an object, the belt. And with that, there was no turning back. Monday morning, Daniel entered the school with firm steps but a heavy heart. He carried a manila folder under his arm. Inside were Valentina's drawing, notes he'd made about her behavior, and Hugo's account. It was enough. He left the school during recess and went straight to the local DIF office. The waiting room was nearly empty, a corner. Fan made more noise than air. "You can come in, Mr. Daniel." A social worker called, leading him to a back room. Inside, he explained everything calmly, clearly showed the papers, spoke of Valentina's pain, her fear, how she refused to sit, told about the stepfather. She listened attentively, took notes, then sighed and responded in a tone too bureaucratic for what Daniel felt in his chest. "I understand your concern, teacher, really, but legally, we don't yet have enough ground for direct intervention." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean not enough? A 6-year-old girl says it hurts to sit. Her brother talks about a belt. Those are strong signs, yes, but they're still signs without a medical report, without someone seeing it happen or a formal complaint from the family. A judge will hardly authorize removing the child," she explained, her eyes tired. "So what? We wait until she shows up with a broken bone," Daniel replied, his voice trembling. "We have to wait for ongoing monitoring to reveal something more concrete, but I can't promise anything immediate." Daniel stood from the chair, struggling not to explode. "With all due respect, if something happens to that girl, the blame will fall on those who knew and did nothing." The social worker didn't respond, just lowered her gaze to the paper in front of her. Outside, the sun burned on the concrete. Daniel returned to his car. Folder under his arm, he sat, stayed still, feeling powerless, frustrated, useless, but more determined than ever. That night, he reviewed Valentina's activity notebook again, recalling what the psychologist had said. She's trying to speak, and no one's listening. Daniel took a new sheet and wrote by hand, in firm letters, "You can tell me anything, however you want. I'm here." He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the folder. He'd find another way, even if it was slow. even if he was alone. He wouldn't let that girl fall back into silence. Tuesday morning, Daniel crossed the courtyard more slowly than usual. He'd slept little again. The image of Valentina standing, eyes down, voice muted, wouldn't leave his mind. He knocked on the school psychologist's office door. Letitia gestured the chair across her desk. "Did you talk to DIF?" she asked. Daniel nodded without enthusiasm. "I talked and heard what I expected. No action without proof. It's like a child's pain only matters if you got on video." Letitia sighed, resting her elbows on the table. "We can try something else, something careful, discreet, but it might help, a pocket recorder. If she agrees to talk without pressure and knows she's being recorded, we could have her testimony more securely. A spontaneous statement can carry a lot of weight in a new evaluation." Daniel hesitated. "I don't want her to feel invaded. That's why it has to be gentle. A conversation. We tell her we're recording to remember what she says later. No pressure. No. Interrogation. Let's try it." That same day, after recess, Letitia called Valentina to her office. Daniel was already there, sitting in one of the small chairs like a student. The girl entered with tiny steps. Glancing around, Letitia smiled, set out a blank sheet and colored pencils on the table. "We just called you to talk a little. Okay. It's not a big deal. We just want to know how you feel at school." After a few seconds, Valentina sat carefully on the edge of the chair. Letitia turned on the recorder. "We record just to remember what we talk about." "Okay, like when you record a lesson so you don't forget? Is that all right?" Valentina nodded. Letitia spoke softly. "I've seen you make really beautiful drawings. Do you like to draw when you're happy or when you're sad?" Valentina answered in a small voice. "When I'm sad." A few seconds passed. "When he gets mad," she said finally. Daniel spoke gently. "He's Rogelio." Valentina nodded. "What does he do when he gets mad?" She moved the pencil. Making a shapeless scribble, he yells. "Tells me to be quiet. Puts me in the corner." Sometimes with a belt. Letitia exchanged a glance with Daniel, but didn't interrupt. "You know that's not okay, right?" she said calmly. "And no one's allowed to hit you. He hits me even when I'm quiet." Silence. That sentence cut the air like a blade. Letitia carefully turned off the recorder. Daniel stood and crouched beside the girl. "Valentina, no one can do that to you. Ever. We're here to protect you. Okay." She lifted her gaze, and for the first time, she didn't seem scared, just tired. Tired of enduring blows in silence. That afternoon, Daniel returned home with the recorder in his pocket. They could ignore drawing, but they couldn't ignore her voice. The next morning, Daniel arrived at school earlier than ever, the recorder in his pocket, his heart still heavy with Valentina's words. "He hits me even when I'm quiet." He went to the coordination room to find Letitia. She was at the computer, finishing the report. "It's ready," she said without him asking. "I'm attaching a recording and the history you gave me." Daniel nodded silently. Something inside him said they couldn't wait any longer. That same morning, Letitia called an emergency staff meeting. For the first time, the other teachers heard clearly what was happening. "We need to watch Valentina closely." Letitia said, "If she shows up with new marks, if she acts strangely, if she says anything unusual, note it, report it. Everything could matter, Carmen." The principal leaned against the wall. When Letitia finished, she only said, "Do what you think is right," and left the room. No one was surprised. Over the next few days, attention on Valentina grew. But discreetly, recess monitors, librarians, even custodial staff began to observe. Some said she smiled more when near Daniel. Others noticed she flinched at loud voices, even from a distance, until one Tuesday, she arrived different, wearing a sweater despite the heat, walking more slowly, sitting with greater difficulty. When Daniel called her for a group activity, she hesitated to stand. "Everything okay, Valentina?" he asked. She nodded, but something was wrong. During recess, Daniel saw her playing alone in a corner of the courtyard. Her sweater lifted slightly, revealing part of her back. There he saw it, long, fresh bruises. Daniel didn't wait. He left the school immediately, pulled out his phone and dialed police. "This is San Benito Elementary. It's urgent." The same student, Valentina Diaz, showed visible signs of abuse today, confirmed by direct observation. "I need a patrol now." The operator asked if he wanted to stay on the line. "No." He called Valentina over gently and said they needed to talk for a bit. He took her to the psychologist's office. Where Letitia was waiting, as they spoke. Calmly with the girl, the patrol arrived. This time, no protocols or excuses. One of the officers, the same one from weeks before, looked at Daniel with a different attitude. Now we have what we need. They took Valentina to the nearest medical center. The report will be issued that day. Rogelio didn't come pick her up, neither did Rebecca. By evening, the school was empty, but Daniel was still there, staring out the classroom window into the dimming light. When Letitia walked in, "Did you talk?" To Diaghilev, Daniel nodded. They said with the medical report and the recording, "It's a matter of hours." Letitia sighed with relief. "We got there in time." Daniel didn't respond. "We got there when she was already hurt." But they had arrived, and for the first time, someone had done something concrete to pull Valentina out of her silence. That night, Valentina didn't return home. After the medical report, the recorded conversation, and the signed statement from the psychologist and teacher, a decision was made: emergency protective custody. A patrol escorted the girl to a children's shelter in the neighboring district. She sat in the back of the car, clutching her school notebook, eyes fixed on the window. No one knew what she was thinking. Upon arrival, a social worker named Dolores opened the car door and spoke to her gently. "We're here. Valentina, this is a safe place." Yes, Valentina stepped out slowly and looked at the white two-story building with barred windows. "Will Hugo come?" Dolores crouched to her level and answered kindly. "Yes, my dear, he'll come too, but first, he has to go to another place with another team. He'll be here with you soon." "Okay." Valentina only nodded, but as she entered the room with two unfamiliar beds, white walls, and a strong smell of disinfectant, the tears came. She didn't scream or sob. She cried quietly, as she always did inside. Daniel arrived at the shelter later, carrying a folder with school authorization, a bag with colored pencils, blank, paper, and a blue-covered children's book with animal illustrations. The shelter coordinator greeted him at the entrance. "Hello, Mr. Daniel. Valentina's in the reading room. You can go in," the woman said with a discreet smile. Daniel thanked her and walked the small room. When Valentina saw him, her eyes lit up with something different. Not joy, but relief. "Hi, Valentina," Daniel said. Sitting on the floor beside her, she responded in a thread of a voice. "Hi." Daniel slowly lifted the bag. "I brought some things, paper, pencils, a book. Thought you might want to draw." Valentina reached out and took the bag carefully. "Wanu," he said with a faint smile. "This is all yours for today." She picked up a blue pencil and a sheet, but paused before drawing, asking with a worried look, "Does he know I'm here?" Daniel knew instantly who she meant, his voice firm. "No. And even if he did, he can't hurt you anymore. The police are looking for him. You're safe here. If I told, I'd disappear with him." Daniel took a deep breath, leaned in, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Valentina, can you look at me for a second?" She raised her eyes slowly, face serious. "You're not alone anymore," Daniel said, his voice low and firm. "Do you hear me? You'll never go through that again, I promise." Valentina nodded faintly and, without a word, rested her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that for a while. In the silence was peace. As he left, Daniel stood slowly. Before going, he pulled a folded, handwritten paper from the folder and handed it to her with her school notebook. "This is yours. Okay, read it when you want, and draw whenever you feel like it." Valentina took the paper carefully. When Daniel left, she opened it, the paper read, "When you're scared, draw. And remember I'm here." Outside, the sun sank behind the trees, and for the first time in a long time, Valentina was in a place where no one yelled, no one hit, no one told her to be quiet. She was far from home, yes, but finally close protection. 2 days passed since Valentina arrived at the shelter. She remained quiet, drew a lot, slept little, asked about Hugo now and then, glanced at the door as if expecting Rebecca to appear, saying everything was okay. But Rebecca didn't come. On the 3rd day, a social worker called the numbers listed in the school file. No one answered. She went to a home Daniel had visited. The door was locked, the windows too. Neighbors said Rebecca had been seen leaving with a backpack the night before Valentina went to the shelter. She hadn't returned. The police were notified. Mrs. Rebecca Diaz has been missing since Monday. There's suspicion she fled with her partner, Rogelio Mendez. The lead officer said in an internal memo, the news spread among the shelter staff. Letitia, the psychologist, called Daniel that day. The police think she might be hiding Rogelio. Daniel, on the other end, took a moment to respond. She knew what he was doing to her, but still fled with him. Letitia replied in a lower tone. It's too early to say for sure, but it looks like she's being manipulated. He has a history of psychological violence, the kind of control that suffocates even a mother's instinct to protect her children. That night, Valentina had a crisis. The caregiver entered the room and found her trembling, curled up in the corner of the bed, clutching Daniel's note, her face soaked with tears. I don't want to be here without Hugo, she screamed, and my mom's never coming back. It was the first time she'd screamed. Letitia rushed the room, sat on the floor with her, and held her for long minutes. Valentina shook, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Hugo had been moved to another shelter by DIF order, a standard measure, boys and girls separated by age and gender. But for Valentina, it was another, abandonment. He promised he'd come, she whispered, lying on her side. He said he'd come. Daniel visited that afternoon, entering the reading room to find her curled up on the rug, clutching a dark-stroke drawing. He sat beside her without a word. My mom ran away. Daniel hesitated, then answered firmly but carefully. We don't know that yet, but the police are looking for her, and if she's in danger, we'll find her. Do you hear me? Valentina didn't answer, just clutched the drawing to her chest and murmured, I wanted her to choose me, not him. Daniel closed his eyes, holding back emotion. He knew that wound would take time to heal, but one thing was certain. He wouldn't let abandonment be the final chapter of her story. That Tuesday seemed like any other. Daniel arrived early at school as usual, arranged the books on the desk, walked the halls with his mind racing. It had been days since he'd seen Valentina. Or Hugo's smile. Since Hugo's transfer to another shelter, he'd been unreachable. The mother's silence still echoed, a plain envelope in hand, Mr. Daniel. This was left for you at the front office. They didn't say who it was from. Daniel took the envelope. White, no sender, no stamp, no address, just his name handwritten. To teacher Daniel Martinez. His heart skipped without clear reason. He opened it carefully inside. A folded sheet written in blue ink. The handwriting shaky, uneven, almost childlike. If you're reading this, it's because you're still looking out for my daughter. Thank you. I never imagined an outsider would do what I couldn't. I know everyone thinks I ran away by choice, but it's not true. I was scared. He threatened me. Said he'd do worse if I talked. Said he'd disappear with Valentina if I opened my mouth. And I believe him. I always believe him. He doesn't let me go out alone. I can't use a phone. But yesterday he left for a few hours, and I managed to write. This, an old house on a dirt road near San Lucas, behind an abandoned warehouse. The house has green walls and only one window. Please help my daughter. I don't want to run anymore. I just want this to end. Rebecca. Daniel read the letter twice. By the third time, his hand was shaking. He stood without a word, went straight to the principal's office. Carmen, I need to use the school phone now. He was already dialing. Police. This is Daniel Martinez from San Benito Elementary. I received a letter. It's from a mother of our student Valentina Diaz. She's hiding. She's scared, but she wants help. I have the address. Less than 2 hours later, the school courtyard was surrounded by unmarked patrols. A detective from the Child Welfare Unit gathered the small team quietly. This is a delicate operation. We'll move fast and keep it low profile. The priority is to get the woman out alive and arrest the suspect if he's with her. Daniel handed the letter to an agent, his hand still cold. She trusted me with this. Please don't let her regret it. By late afternoon, Daniel was still at school, pacing the empty classroom when the phone rang. He answered on the second ring. Detective Romero speaking. Mrs. Rebecca Diaz was located. She was in a house, exactly as described, alone at the time of the operation, scared but cooperating. She's in protective custody and receiving psychological support. You did the right thing. Daniel closed his eyes, breathed deeply, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in days. And Rogelio, he asked, tense, not there. We're tracking places he frequents. With her testimony, we have grounds for a formal arrest warrant. Daniel thanked him and hung up. He sat in the classroom chair, staring at the empty chalkboard. The mother had failed, had fled, had stayed silent. But now she wanted to make it right. And sometimes that's all someone needed to start over. For now, he sat in silence, holding the envelope as if it were a piece of handwritten hope. Rebecca sat in a small room with beige walls and the smell of stale coffee. Across the table, Two detectives listened attentively. The recorder was on. Her hands trembled, but her voice was firm. He always goes to his brother's workshop, almost every afternoon. It's in an industrial zone near an abandoned market. One detective confirmed the location on a map. Is he still armed? I think so. A few days ago, he threatened me with a knife, said if he saw me talking to anyone, he'd make me disappear. Rebecca replied, her eyes full of tears. Are you willing to testify? The other detective asked carefully. Rebecca nodded firmly. For my daughter, I'll do anything now. It was a muggy afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds. As if time itself held its breath, 6 unmarked patrols positioned themselves on streets near the workshop. 2 undercover agents were already inside, posing as customers. Outside, hidden behind a car, Daniel and Letitia waited with Hugo and Valentina. It had been hard to convince the judge to let the siblings be nearby. Even at a distance, they needed to see with their own eyes that the fear was over. Valentina trembled. Hugo held her hand tightly. He'll come out the front entrance. An agent said over the radio, confirmed, target in sight. Inside, Rogelio had just arrived, walking calmly as if nothing were wrong, joking with an employee, grabbing a toolbox, lighting a cigarette. Then it all happened fast. Now an agent shouted. Rogelio tried to flee out the back, but patrol was already waiting. He resisted, shoved an officer, grabbed a piece of wood. Threatened, he was subdued with force, handcuffed, thrown to the ground. Screaming nonsense. I didn't do anything. It's her lie. It's a setup. But no one believed him. Behind the car, Valentina watched with wide eyes. Hugo hugged her shoulders. Daniel beside them confirmed, that's him. And now he can't touch you anymore. Valentina said nothing, but her body relaxed. Her face still scared, but now holding something new. Relief. When the patrol took Rogelio away, she looked at Daniel and asked, would he be far from me forever? Daniel knelt, took her hands, and answered firmly, yes. And even if he's ever free again, you'll never be alone again. She nodded, then rested her head on her brother's chest. And there, for the first time since it all began, she cried without fear, not from pain, but from relief. Hours later, back at the shelter, Valentina asked for something unexpected. I want to draw this afternoon. Daniel gave her paper and pencils, and for the first time, the drawing wasn't a chair, red splotches, or shadows. It was a simple little house, a sun, 2 children holding hands. Daniel recognized the stroke. It was him. Valentina looked at the drawing for a few seconds and smiled a quiet smile. Time moved quickly after Rogelio's arrest. The recording of Valentina's words, the drawings, the medical reports, Rebecca's testimony, and the arrest in flagrante formed a solid case. The prosecutor didn't hesitate. The process was expedited. We're going straight to the preliminary hearing. The prosecutor said it could set the tone for the sentence. Daniel received the news with a heavy heart. Valentina was improving, sleeping more, drawing with different colors, sometimes even laughing genuinely. But nightmares still came, usually in the early hours when silence was louder than anything. Letitia, the psychologist, spoke with her daily. Daniel, too. The judge wants to talk to you. Valentina. She wants to hear what happened from you. But you don't have to be afraid. You can tell everything, or you can stay quiet. No one will force you. Valentina looked at him seriously. I'll talk. Are you sure? She nodded. If I tell, other girls will be safe too. Daniel's eyes welled up, his voice soft. Yes, you can change a lot of things, little one. He helped her find words. They practiced phrases in a soft voice, rehearsed answers without pushing. If she asks how you felt, what will you say? Daniel asked one afternoon at the shelter. Valentina thought for a moment, then answered, fear and shame. Do you hear me? Daniel crouched and looked into her eyes. It was never your fault. Never. The night before the hearing, Valentina had another nightmare. She dreamt she was under a table at school, hands over her ears as Rogelio shouted in the background. When she woke, Letitia was sitting by her bed, as if she knew. Was it him again? She asked gently. Valentina nodded, but in the dream, Teacher Daniel came in and shouted louder. He said, it's over. Letitia smiled. That dream can come true. Tomorrow. But there was a question no one dared voice until Valentina herself spoke. Will my mom be there? Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly, yes. She'll give her testimony too, and the judge will want to know if you want to live with her again. Valentina stayed silent for a long time. She might choose to run again. That's not just up to her anymore. Daniel said firmly, there are people watching out for you, people who'll protect you. And I'll be there too. Valentina took a deep breath. I want to see her, but I don't know if I want to go back. Daniel nodded. That's okay. No one's going to pressure you. You're already so brave for getting this far. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, star-shaped metal pen. He'd kept it in a drawer for years. Now it's yours. Wear it tomorrow and remember, you shine even when you think you can't. Valentina clutched the pen in her hand like a shield, and that night, she slept peacefully. No nightmares. The morning dawned cold and cloudy. Outside the courthouse, a light drizzle wet the stone floor, but inside, hearts beat like drums. Daniel was there in a simple suit, waiting in the witness room. Beside him, seated on a couch with her feet dangling, was Valentina, wearing a navy blue dress and a wool coat Letitia had brought. Her hair held 2 discreet clips, and on her chest, securely fastened, the star-shaped pin. She nodded with her eyes fixed on the door ahead. Soon, a court official opened it. Miss Valentina, it's your turn. The girl stood. Daniel crouched to whisper, just say what your heart wants to say. You've already beaten everything you had to. She walked in the courtroom with small but firm steps. The judge, calm with attentive eyes, observed every movement with empathy. Beside her were prosecutor, public defender, psychologist, and clerk. No robes, no standing, the setting warm, carefully designed not to scare her. Valentina sat in a smaller chair in front of a microphone. The judge spoke. Softly, good morning, Valentina. Don't worry. Okay, we just want to hear you. You can say whatever you want. She continued. Tell us how you felt before, when you lived with your mom and her partner. Valentina took a deep breath and began in a soft voice. I was scared, not just when he yelled, but even when he was quiet. I felt something bad was coming. I didn't do anything, but he still hit me. A profound silence filled the room. The judge asked gently, had you told anyone about this before? I told my teacher. And what changed since then? Valentina looked at the pin on her dress. I started to believe it wasn't my fault, and that I wasn't alone. The judge smiled, her eyes misty. You're very brave, Valentina. Now tell me, do you miss your mom? The girl paused and answered, yes, I miss her, but I also feel like she left me alone when I needed her most. The judge nodded with empathy. Would you like to see her again? Valentina thought for a moment, yes, but with other people, I don't want to live with her yet. I want to be sure she's changed. The room fell silent. The judge thanked her with a smile and asked that she be taken back. Daniel met her outside. She ran into his arms and whispered, I said everything, teacher, and you said it beautifully, he replied, his eyes shining. Later, it was Rebecca's turn. Hands clasped at her lap. The judge looked at her seriously. Mrs. Rebecca Daz, are you prepared to take full responsibility for your acts of omission? Yes, Your Honor, she replied in a low voice. I failed. I stayed silent when I needed protect, but I broke free, and now I just want to rebuild, however long it takes. The prosecutor requested maintaining the minor in protective custody, suggesting supervised visits and psychological support for both. The judge paused briefly, then announced her decision. Considering the severity of the acts, the history of abuse, and the risk to the child's emotional well-being, I maintain Valentina in institutional custody with monitored visits to the mother. The stepfather will remain detained pending criminal trial. A silent sigh swept the room. Outside, Daniel walked Valentina to the shelter's car. The girl turned to look at her for a moment. Their eyes met. Rebecca was crying, but didn't come closer. Valentina didn't either. She raised her hand in a shy wave, a small gesture full of meaning. Now there was space for healing to happen, and that was already a lot. The courtroom was full, but the silence was absolute. The final hearing against Rogelio had begun minutes ago. No one dared move. Even breathing seemed restrained. In the front row, between Letitia and Daniel, Valentina watched. Everything with wide eyes. She looked different, sitting upright, not shrunken, not hiding, present, firm. Beside her, Daniel held her hand gently, saying nothing but fully there. Across the room, Rogelio kept his head down, in a prisoner's uniform, wrists cuffed, no shouting, no smiling, just restless legs. The prosecutor spoke. Your Honor, what we have before us is not just a crime. It's a story of fear, but also of courage of a girl who, despite her age, found her voice and used it to denounce what many adults ignored. Rogelio's public defender did her part. spoke of financial struggles, of violent past, uncontrolled impulses, but no one seemed to listen. When the judge prepared to read the sentence, everyone straightened in their seats. He took the papers, adjusted his glasses, and read, Rogelio Mendez is convicted of aggravated assault, child maltreatment, threats, and coercion. The sentence will be served in a closed facility, effective immediately. The right to appeal is preserved. This court also recognizes a risk to the minor's psychological well-being and prohibits any future contact between the accused and the child. The measure is permanent. A collective sigh followed. The judge looked at Valentina, his voice softer but stronger. Children aren't here to suffer. They're here to grow. What was taken from you, we can't give back. But from today, no one will take anything from you again. Daniel squeezed her hand tightly. Valentina, for a moment, seemed not to believe it, then smiled, not a big, toothy smile, but a sincere, deep, clean one. Rebecca, who'd attended the earlier hearing, seated among the audience, smiled too. Letitia discreetly wiped her eyes. Daniel breathed as if shedding months of weight. When it ended, Valentina stood and turned to him. I can grow now. Daniel crouched and replied, his eyes shining. Of course you can, Valentina. You can do anything. They left the room side by side, unhurried. Outside, the sky was no longer gray. The pavement cold in front of the courthouse. Rebecca watched from a distance. She didn't approach, but nodded subtly. Valentina saw her and returned the gesture naturally, without resentment, without fear, just with peace, just as it arrived. But life was just beginning. It was Monday. A new month started, and with it, a new time. Valentina paused before entering the school, her uniform clean, hair in 2 simple braids, a light backpack on her shoulders. Beside her, the shelter caregiver gave her an affectionate nod. Everything's going to be okay. My dear, if anything happens, I'll come for you early. Okay. Valentina nodded and stepped inside. The hall seemed smaller than she remembered. The colorful posters still there. The hurried steps of other students. Everything familiar but different. Because this time, she wasn't afraid. Entering the classroom, her classmates turned to look. Some smiled. Others whispered. But Valentina walked with firm steps across the rows of desks and stopped at hers. Daniel watched from beside the chalkboard, heart tight, eyes misty. The girl looked at the chair, the one that once meant pain, fear, shame. But now she pulled it out calmly, sat alone, without hesitation, without help, looked at Daniel and smiled softly. It doesn't hurt anymore. The teacher took a deep breath, swallowing emotion. I know, Valentina, I know. The class went on, notebooks open, pencils in hand, soft voices of children learning to read. Right exists, but in that corner of the classroom, something was different. You're the strongest girl I've ever known. Valentina looked at him, her eyes shining, and replied, I just needed someone to believe in me. Daniel opened his arms, and she hugged him, unhurried, without pain, a hug that asked for nothing, just a confirmation that everything was different now. At the end of the day, Daniel stayed alone in the classroom. Tidying up, he paused for a moment in front of the desk where Valentina had sat, a symbol of a painful past transformed into a new beginning. He thought, every child deserves to sit in. Peace. Then he erased the chalkboard, turned off the light, and left the room, his heart light, knowing that this little girl at last could grow.